Alright, so you open Star Rail and you're in absolute despair because you have no idea who to pull for. Hoyoverse knows this, and their ultimate goal is to get you to spend money. And by spend money, I mean give up your life savings and sell your soul. But I'm assuming most of you watching this are either free to play or low spenders, and you pretty much have no stellar jades. In this video, I'm going to give you some advice when it comes to pulling so that you can better spend your stellar jades. By the end of this video, my goal is to help you make more informed decisions when it comes to pulling on specific banners. Also, this video isn't going to be a generic just pull for who you like type of video, but that actually is one of my points. I'll go more into detail as to what that actually means so it makes more sense to you. And one last thing before I start is everything I say in this video also applies to Genshin, but I'm going to be mainly focusing on Star Rail. Okay, starting off, and the first important thing to keep in mind is to be realistic. If you're free to play or a low spender, it's very unlikely that you can actually pull every single featured character. While it's technically possible, you shouldn't expect it to happen. Far too often, I see people thinking they can pull many, if not all, banner characters. It just doesn't work that way unless you're a gargantuan whale, and here's why. So looking at this table, you can see various amounts of distributions for how many wishes it takes to pull a 5-star on average. The second column shows any 5-star, while the third column shows a featured 5-star. So let's focus on the third column. If you look at the blue rows, you can see that only about 20% of the time will you actually end up pulling a featured 5-star in 69 wishes or under. At the 50% row in the yellow section, it shows that it takes 80 pulls on average to get a featured 5-star. This means that 50% of the time you get a featured 5-star, it's going to take 80 pulls, which is kind of a lot of stellar jades. The important thing to keep in mind here is that this is on average, so it's definitely possible to end up in the blue rows or even the red rows. If you're more interested in this table, I'll leave a link in the description. Credit goes to the original author of this, as I did not make this table. I am way too lazy for that. It was originally calculated for Genshin, but it works for Star Rail as well because the gacha systems are exactly the same. Anyway, as a free-to-play, you generally get about 50 to 60 rail passes per patch, give or take, meaning that on average, you will get a featured character less than once per patch, and about once per patch if you're a light spender, assuming the 80 average. Again, this is just on average, so it's totally possible to not get a featured 5-star at all, or you can get multiple 5-stars, it really just depends on luck. Now this leads me to my second point, which is planning ahead. If you want a specific character in an ongoing banner, you also have to think about how that will affect your chances of getting a different character in the future. If you spend all your stellar jades now, it will reduce the chance of you getting another character if their banner is upcoming. I know this sounds pretty obvious, but it's common for people to overlook this because they're focused on the current banner. I also think sometimes people pull on banners when they don't actually intend to because they're afraid of the character not getting a rerun for a long time. While that is a fair concern, I don't think it's worth it to spend your stellar jades if that's your only reason. And more often than not, I see people regret doing it, so I just wouldn't recommend it. So basically, my second piece of advice is to plan ahead and also go in hand with the first point and be realistic with what you will probably end up getting with the amount of stellar jades that you receive per patch. It might sound obvious, but you have to make a choice if you're not a whale. Unfortunately, that's just how the game works. I wish it was easier. That's really up to Hoyoverse. Now my third piece of advice is to pull for who you like, the most common but also useless advice. So what does this actually mean? I think there are 4 main things to look out for when deciding what makes a character appealing. Now keep in mind that these are subjective and some of you may place higher priority on these, while some of you might consider them less important. It really just depends on you. So number 1 is the character's design. This could be their physical appearance, their personality, how aesthetically pleasing their abilities look, their voice actor, it could be anything. Number 2, the character's relevance in the lore and story. Now I know some of you probably don't care about this, but maybe for some of you this is a deal breaker. If the character doesn't have a lot of, relevance in the lore, maybe they might not be as appealing to you, but it really just depends. Number 3, how strong this character is in comparison to others. Objectively speaking, some characters are just better than others when built optimally, it's just how the game is. If everyone was S tier, it just wouldn't make sense, it's just not how it works. And number 4 is how well this character fits in your current party, and how well they will pair with future characters. Now this one can be a bit tricky sometimes, but I think it really also comes down to how much you actually like the character's kit. If you really like the character's kit and they also fit in your team, that also works. It really just comes down to your preference. So there's obviously more than 4, but I think these are usually the most common things people look out for when pulling characters. If you evaluate what's important to you, then you'll be able to weigh your options and make a decision on whether to pull for someone or not. I think the most important part of this is to not end up regretting your decision in the future when pulling a character. I'll use myself as an example. In 1.0, everyone and their grandmother was telling others to pull for Zila because she's overpowered. While I do agree she's arguably the strongest DPS, or probably is the strongest DPS, I care more about a character's design than how well they actually perform in combat. So I didn't pull for her, and I saved her Silverwolf. And fast forward, I don't regret my decision because I picked what mattered more to me. In this case, it was the character's design, not how well they perform in combat. So ultimately, it's all about identifying what aspects of a character you actually like the most, and then weighing those options and then seeing, should I pull for this character or not? Because I know in Star Rail, a lot of people just pull for characters because they're really good in combat, which makes sense, but you also have to keep in mind other things could matter to you more than others. So it's all about just weighing those options and seeing, is this character actually worth pulling for my account? Which finally leads me to my last and most important point, which is to make sure that when you're pulling, it's based off your decision, not others. I know peer pressure is a real thing when it comes to pulling for a specific character, but more often than not, if the decision wasn't yours, you'll almost always regret it sooner or later. I emphasize on this one the most because your experience playing this game should be how you want to play the game. If you pull for a character you don't like, or you just don't like using them, it's going to hinder your experience. This was also pretty common in Genshin when the game was new, and it's happening again in Star Rail. Star Rail is still fairly new, and it's happening to a lot of people where they pull for characters they don't actually want, because some others might have just told them they're really overpowered, which I don't necessarily blame them, but it's important to keep in mind that when you're pulling, it should be based off your decision, not from others. I'm just here to remind you that if you make your own choices that are not influenced by others completely, it will actually make your experience in this game a lot better. So that's my advice when pulling. I probably missed a few things, but that's pretty much the gist of it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, I'll try to get back to you. And yeah, good luck on your pulls. Also, just a quick explanation for those of you wondering where I've been for the past month. I pretty much got sick and then went through a series of events where I couldn't use my voice at all. It was a pretty unpleasant experience. I would say I'm about 70 to 80% back to normal, and I can actually talk again, which is nice. So I should be able to start uploading again. Thanks for understanding. But yeah, that'll be all for this one. Hopefully it helped. I will see you guys later.